lines. And Lord, bless those that are watching online on Facebook and Zoom. And Lord, be with us as we head home tonight. Let the rain hold off till we get to our houses. And we just thank you so much for that. And let this all advance your kingdom and grow your church. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Remember, your all's job is to see if there's anybody that's going to be on Zoom tonight. I know Jimmy's here and Jill's here, and they're usually on Zoom with us at times. So Jenny might be on there. There could be other people, so just keep a watch on that point if you would. All right, so welcome. We're glad you're here with us on Facebook and on Zoom. And so we're going to be in 2 Kings 17 tonight. We've been going line by line through, looking at all the different kings, and there's a pink handout on the tables. There's probably not enough of those handouts. I think that's a great thing, that we don't have a ton of them. So you might have to share with somebody, but if you don't mind. So we're going to talk about page 2 before we talk about page 1. All right, so we've got a 2-page handout. The first page is pink, the second page is white. The white page is a list of all the kings in the Old Testament, in the lower kingdom, the southern kingdom of Judah, and in the northern kingdom of Israel. And the reason it's listed the way that it is because King Saul, King David, and King Solomon were all kings over both. And then it split after Solomon, and that's why you have the others. But it's an interesting piece because it's got 19 kings that were kings of Judah, 19 kings who were the kings of Israel. And the number of years is different, and we're going to talk about the kingdom of Israel tonight. We're going to take a break from a specific king to talk about the kingdom of Israel because they had 19 kings and then they went away. And the reason they went away is they got attacked by the Assyrians, and the Assyrian, empire came and defeated them and carried them off, and the word is diaspora, dispersed them around the world throughout their kingdom, and then brought other people in to live where they had been. And he left some people there, Shalmaneser and Tiglath-Pileser, and all these guys with these strange names, left a group of Israelites there, and they intermarried, and that's how you ended up with the Samaritans. Jesus at the well with the Samaritan woman, and her saying, Jews and Samaritans don't talk to each other. We don't like each other. And the reason is because, like I have said many times, the Jews considered them to be half-breeds. They considered them to be half Jewish and half Assyrian and half other people around the world because they'd intermarried. So we're going to take a few moments, and I want you to see that if we're looking on this sheet, on this side here, on the far left side, if you're looking at it, it's on the right side, but it's right here on the page. The last king of Israel was Hoshea, and we're going to be right there because that's where we are in our line by line. We're supposed to be talking about a couple of kings of Judah tonight, and we're going to kind of stop there because the northern kingdom of Israel is going away at this point underneath the king that we were just talking about. So it'll get clearer here in just a minute, I promise. So you have that in front of you, and you can see how long each king was in office, and you can see the site in 1st or 2nd Kings where you could look that up and see it for yourself and read that story. And we've been going line by line through all these different kings, and so tonight we're going to take a little break. Like I said, 2 Kings 17, and I want you to see what happens. Okay, so we're going to let's look at 17:7, and if you're looking for a time frame, all of this starts, the Assyrians start kind of sending troops down there in 733 BC, so 733 years before Christ. And then they attack and defeat the Israelites in 722, and that's when that kingdom ends. Now, for you all, how many total tribes are there for the Jews? 12. And why did they have 12? Who did they represent? 12 sons. Jacob's 12 sons. And remember, you had Jacob had 4 wives. Remember, one of the first wife was Leah, who he got. Remember the incident in the tent where he married. Thought he had married Rachel, but he married Leah, her sister. Shouldn't say ugly. She had, what was it? It says light eyes or something like that. I don't know what that means.
Kind eyes?
Yes, it was kind of like she had a nice personality. That's kind of the way the Bible was putting it. And again, she must have been equal size with Rachel, because I'm not going to go into a tent and think it's my wife if she's 6 feet tall and the other one's 5'5". So roughly the same. But he had children with Leah. Then he had children with Rachel's slave girl. Then he had children with Leah's slave girl. Then he had children with Rachel. And so he's got these 4 wives that he's having children with, and that's where he gets the 12 sons. That's where you get these 12 tribes. Well, the kingdom in the north had 10 tribes, and the kingdom in the south had just Judah. And remember, Levi, that tribe was actually the priests in both areas. So if you're trying to keep things straight in your head about who we're talking about. So we're talking about these 10 tribes in the north being carried off. And that's where we are in this. And we're asking the question, why? Why were they carried off? All right, so if we look in the scripture right here, 17:7 says, all this took place because. So that's the answer to our why question, right? There's a question mark, why, question mark, and it said this all happened because. And it's going to go and tell us what the Israelites in the north had done. And it says that it took place because the Israelites had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up out of Egypt from under the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And so everybody here should say the word duh. Duh. Right? Sin. Sin got them into trouble, right? This is Chris Caldwell's deep thoughts, complex ideas, right? Is that they sinned and they got in trouble. We know that. You guys didn't have to come to a Bible study on Wednesday night to figure that out, right? But you really have to try to say, at times, for us, we struggle with what is sin and what is not. We say things like, I don't think that's a sin. Or Chris doesn't think that's a sin, or whatever. And in all actuality, the actual moral compass is the Bible. The actual moral compass is God's word that says this is sin, this is not. And so for us, the world that we live in today says, there's a lot of gray area. Well, the Bible is pretty straightforward about, hey, what sin is and what it isn't. And it's going to lay it out for us. And it's going to make it real obvious. And the problem when you start reading through this is it's going to really start reminding you of our country. And that's the painful part. Because we're actually talking about 700 years before Christ. And it's been, how long has it been since Christ was here? 2,000 years or so, you know what I mean? So here we are, 2,700 years later, and we're doing some of the same stuff to make God upset. So, and it's us rebelling. It's not anything more than that. It's not that God is being kind of evil to us, or God is, set this bar so high that we can't live up to it. It is the things that He's saying aren't good for us. Everybody here understands that, right? That it wasn't God being capricious is a fancy word. It wasn't just Him kind of saying, I like these things, I don't like these things. It wasn't that. It's actual, when you look at the sins as they are defined in the Bible, it's stuff that is bad for us. You know what I'm saying? And though we choose to sin at times, and Sam and I have had this conversation a little bit. Okay, so if I go, somebody said something, I was talking to Connor Upshaw today, and he said something about driving to Lawrenceburg every day. And I said, man, if I drove to Lawrenceburg every day, I'd weigh 30 pounds more. And he goes, what? You'd weigh 30 pounds more? Why? And I said, because I got to pass Schaefer's 2 times, right? I go by Schaefer's barbecue 2 times every day. And I would just have to stop and get some pork barbecue, right? Well, Sam and I have had that discussion about in the Bible. In the Old Testament, we weren't supposed to eat pork. And, when I go to the doctor, what does the doctor say to me? Remember, he looks at that chart on the wall. Remember, we've talked about this before. There's a chart. And it starts on this side over here, and it's nice and green on this chart right here. And then it moves this way, and it turns to this kind of ugly mustard color of yellow. And then if we go over here, it's fire engine red, right? And he's looking at how tall you are and how much you weigh. And he's going, and then he goes, Chris, how tall are you? How much do you weigh? And he goes, you're morbidly obese. Right? Over here is what he tells me. You're morbidly obese. And he says, tell me what you eat. And I go, good. A lot of Schaefer's barbecue. And he goes, you shouldn't eat so much pork. It's not good for you, right? That's not, and I'm not picking on Schaefer's because it's outstanding, right? Whatever barbecue place you like, it's outstanding. And yet God says it's not healthy for you. And the doctors back him up, right? And the doctors say, it's not the best thing for you. So we can choose to eat it or not. It's that kind of thing. So some of this You know, I want you to make sure that you always understand when God said it's a sin because it's painful to us. It causes suffering, it causes chaos and conflict in our life. It causes us to hurt or causes us even to die, right? I have a friend that smokes, and if you're ever around her, if you go out and you have a meal together, she's the nicest lady in the world, and you have great conversation, you'll do all this stuff, and then after the meal is over, you'll walk outside the restaurant and she'll go, and this is the face she makes. She goes, she's smoking a cigarette out there, and I mean, to her, it is the most enjoyable thing on the planet. She goes, ah, you know, like that, and you go, that's going to kill you and give you cancer and cause birth defects and all that. She goes, oh, I know. You know, it's that kind of thing, is that we choose to sin sometimes. You know, things feel good to us or sound good to us or whatever it might be. So here we have this, and he's laying these sins out for us, and he starts with it right there, and he says, they worshipped other gods and followed the practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before them, as well as the practices that the kings of Israel had introduced. All right? So it says they worshipped other gods. Well, in the world that we live in, you know, as far as I'm concerned, you can worship whoever you want to worship. If you ask me, though, and you say, what are your thoughts on that, Chris? I'll say you're worshiping a false god, right? I will say there's only one true living God. Do you have the right? You know, in the United States, we have the freedom to worship anything we want. If you want to worship a frog, you can worship a frog. And if you come to me and you say, do I have the right to worship a frog? I'll say, absolutely, you can worship a frog. That's up to you. That's your business or whatever. But if they say to me, Chris, is that frog going to do anything for me? You know, is that going to help me in any way, shape, or form? Is it going to get me to frog heaven? Is it going to get me wherever it's going to go? Then I'm going to say, absolutely not. You've been led astray. Right? That's where we stand. And we have people in our country and our world that worship all kinds of stuff, right? I mean, just all kinds of stuff. And so, in fact, if you go to India, they have thousands of gods. And then you go to parts of China, and God is in everything. So I worship the butterflies. I worship the cedar trees. I worship the clouds. I worship, you know, because God's in everything. So I'm going to worship everything. And so you have some of that stuff going on. But they're worshiping false gods, is what it says. Gods of stone. Gods made of wood, as the Bible claims on several occasions. All right, so if we keep going, it says, the Israelites secretly did things against the Lord their God that were not right. Well, is that any different than today? When does most sin occur? Lots of sin occurs at night. And why is that?
Because Taco Bell's open 24 hours.
We think we're keeping it a secret, right? I mean, what'd you say, Sam?
David said Taco Bell's open 24 hours.
That's right. That's exactly right. If you, you know, it's not uncommon for us to go out at night, and in fact, you know, the idea is that somehow, when in the dark, people can't see what you're doing. That it's more of a secret or whatever, that the things that I do at night. And, you know, the Bible's real clear to say whatever you do in secret is going to be brought out in the light. And that's true. Every single person that I've ever known who tried to do something, every single show you watch on TV about the world's greatest crime or whatever, they always get caught every single time. And my favorite of late is the guy who was a serial killer in California and had gotten away with it for like 50 years. 50 years this guy had gotten away with the perfect crimes. I mean, he killed lots of people. And you're like, 50 years, and he sent the DNA off to Ancestry DNA. That's how they caught him. Was that, you know? And they went to his house, and he goes, oh yeah, it's me. And you go, 50 years you kept this a secret. And you know what I mean? Is that we try to hide things in the dark, but it eventually comes out.
If you've committed a crime, that's really not smart on your end. Like, why would you think, oh, it just went away?
And for 50 years, the dude had kept it a secret. And so it always comes out.
It's all done.
Yeah, exactly. So let's keep going.
It works for Ancestry.
It says, exactly. It says, from watchtower to fortified city, they built themselves high places in all their towns. They set up sacred shrines and Asherah poles on every hill and under every spreading tree. Okay, so two different things going on there. And for us, you know, we sit there and go, worship the starry host. We don't know anybody that worships the stars. I mean, I don't really. And yet, you know, what was the group that, remember they all got in their beds and were waiting on the mothership to land, they all died, right?
Heaven's Gate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, yeah.
All waiting for the aliens to come get them from the, to land here and come take them. That's a recent thing. That's not. If you go, if you do any research, now John's writing a novel, so he likes to do sci-fi kind of stuff and Christian stuff. But I mean, if you do research, sci-fi stuff, and you go read about the pyramids and about all this, the different pyramids in Latin America and South America and all that, one of the things that you realize is that they aligned those, like the three biggest pyramids in Egypt are aligned with 3 stars in the heavens. They are literally lined up perfectly, longitude and latitude, with these stars, mathematically. And so they're worshiping the stars. They're trying to find ways to, and you'll go and you read hieroglyphs any part of the world, and they always have images of some kind of aliens or something like that. They have the, if you read enough about Latin America, they'll have the ancient aliens, they'll have ancient astronauts, where they're looking at these hieroglyphs and saying, man, that looks like an astronaut, like somebody coming down in a rocket, But they're all worshiping the stars kind of thing. We have each Hollywood true stories. That's the stars we worship. But it says the other thing is that they set up. Did you hear? It says I'm in verse 10. They set up sacred stones and Asherah poles on every high hill and every spreading tree. We personally hear Asherah is one of their gods. Remember Baal, the male god, Asherah, the female god, and actually fertility gods that you would worship to make sure that your crops came in, that you had lots of children, all those kind of things, that life was going good for you. But you would set those things up. Now, sacred stones. Do we have sacred stones?
Yeah.
Okay. You do know that as a Christian you can't go to Mecca, right? You do know that you're not allowed to go to Mecca. That is actually the where the Kaaba is in terms of where the Muslims worship. It's the most holy place beside. Right outside the Kaaba, which is covered with a big black curtain, there's a box that sits there and it's got under glass and has a sacred black stone that is right there. And as they go around it, running as fast as they possibly can, you try to touch that black stone, and it's part of your worship, and you turn and you go the other way. And as you watch it, if you've ever seen that at all, it's the craziest looking thing you've ever seen, because it's like thousands of people in this throng going one direction and then the other. And then that sacred stone is up there, and they consider that sacred stone to be part of Abraham's well where he left Hagar and Ishmael, and so they consider that a holy relic that they're trying. It's a sacred stone to them, and we have that. We have there's people who have you ever met somebody that's all into crystals and all that kind of stuff? Healing principles, all that kind of stuff. We got all that stuff even today, so it's not far-fetched. Verse 11, at every high place they burned incense as the nations whom the Lord had driven out before them had done. Notice that. They had wicked things that, they did wicked things that aroused the Lord's anger. They worshipped idols, though the Lord had said, you shall not do this. The Lord warned Israel and Judah through all his prophets and seers, turn from your evil ways, observe my commands and decrees in accordance with the entire law that I commanded your ancestors to obey, and that I delivered to you through my servants, the prophets. Well, the problem about that is what did they do with the prophets that God sent? They killed them. They killed those prophets. And why would that be? Why would you kill the prophets?
You killed the messenger.
Because you're hearing some hard truths, like Daniel, right?
Yes, exactly right. Exactly. Number one, I'm upset because you're the messenger. But number two, what you're telling me is making me upset because it makes me have to stop doing something. It's hard truth that I don't want to listen to. And we even have good kings that have done part of this. 2 weeks ago we talked about the one king of Judah that the messenger came to him and said, don't do this. And the king said, why are you here risking your life? Don't stop speaking now before something bad happens to you. He's just saying, I don't want to hear what you got to say, and I'm going to kill you. So you better just close your mouth right now and leave. And it's that idea of the messenger, but also the idea of that hard truth that comes. But you look at, and I'll give you the scriptures in just a minute. But like Ahab and Jezebel, when the story that I told to the children in services on Sunday about the confrontation on Mount Carmel with Elijah and all the prophets of Baal, prophets of Baal, depending on what part of the country you're from. That particular story, the reason that he is there is because he thinks I'm the only one left because she's killed everybody off. Obadiah says to him, because he meets Obadiah along the road, and Obadiah says, I've been hiding prophets in a cave because she's been trying to kill them one right after the other. And so that's exactly what's going on. The people who were actually, if you read the book of Jeremiah, and very few people read the book of Jeremiah because it is long and drawn out in places. It's a little hard to stay with, but you'll find that Jeremiah is sitting there proclaiming the truth, and the king goes, no, I'm not going to do that. Put him in a cistern in the middle of the courtyard. And they drop him into the mud in the cistern where they would collect water, and he stays in there for a very long time. That instead of killing him, that's what he did with him, just as a punishment. All right, so let's keep reading here for just a second. It says, verse 14, but they would not listen and were as stiff-necked as their ancestors who did not trust in the Lord their God. They rejected his decrees and the covenant he had made with their ancestors and the statutes he had warned them to keep. They followed worthless idols and themselves became worthless. They imitated the nations around them, although the Lord had ordered them, do not do as they do. Now we're going to get into the meat of it here a little bit more. They forsook all the commands of the Lord their God and made for themselves 2 idols cast in the shape of calves and an Asherah pole. They bowed down to all the starry hosts and they worshipped Baal. They sacrificed their sons and daughters in the fire. They practiced divination and sought omens and sold themselves to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger. So the Lord was very angry with Israel and removed them from his presence. All right. So we got to the end there. That's if you're looking at that page of Kings, he gave them, and many of us would say, God is so harsh on us, but just from the time of Solomon, that's all we're talking about in the Old Testament. From Solomon to Hoshea was 229 years. Now,
What's an Asherah pole?
do what?
What's an Asherah pole?
Okay, so just imagine a totem pole from like Alaska, that kind of pole, right?
Okay.
So, and I said this, and I don't mean to in mixed company give you that, but remember when I went on the cruise to Jamaica, when you go into the heart of Jamaica and they're selling stuff, they had penises that were carved out of wood, some of them 6 feet tall, and there were people carrying them back on the boat with them, onto the ship. Seriously. And like a totem, like a pole. I'm not kidding, absolutely. And they were from this size all the way up to as tall as me, and they were selling them all over the place.
Why did you have to ask so?
I know. Dixie's like, I'm sorry for bringing that up, right? Just being, I'm telling you face to face, you know, that's what I saw with my own
Stay off
eyes.
eBay.
That's right. That's get it off eBay. That's right. Okay, so I want you guys, if you're going to drag some good news out of this, because I'm sitting here beating you up with all these different sins, the good news is in 229 years, God did not give up on them, gave them chance after chance after chance, 19 kings to lead them, and God is slow to anger, abounding in love. That is exactly what's there. And he is calling us for our own good. And you guys know this because as parents, if anybody here is a parent, you know that you try your best to train your kids not to run with scissors, right? What's the point? What's the point about not running with scissors?
The point.
Yes, exactly. That's the point, right? Don't play with matches, right? You try to teach your kid, don't play with matches. You try to teach your kid that when they're in the driveway and they're tossing a ball back and forth, or a baseball, or a football, or shooting basketball, if that ball goes bounding towards the street, what do we try to teach our kids?
Don't go running out.
Don't go running out in the street. Look both ways before you go, right? You try to teach your kids that if something on you catches on fire, what do?
Stop,
drop, and roll. Thank you. John knows that, right? Stranger danger. You teach your kids those words, right? You teach your kids all these different things. Why? What's the point of that?
Keep them safe.
Protect them. Because why? Is it just because you want to see them full grown? Yes, that's part of it. It's because you love them. That's the whole reason. Is that my grandmother said to me, Chris, you see how it looks pretty, but when I turn this burner, and she didn't say burner because she's from Tennessee, she said, when the eye on the stove gets real red, you don't touch it. Don't put your hand up there. And I can remember, I couldn't even hardly see. She lifted me up and let me look. She goes, don't put your hand on there because it will burn you. You want to make sure that it's been completely off before you ever touch that. Yes, ma'am. As soon as she leaves the room, what I do? Ah, right? I mean, searing pain in my hand. Is that, you know? I mean, she told me that to protect me from getting hurt, right? When you go, I can imagine, didn't you just see Jimmy riding with Catherine in the car and she's learning to drive, like I had to do with Selah, like Jill did with Selah, right? And you sit there and you go, you want to make sure to keep both hands on the wheel. You want to look at the road. Don't be looking at your phone. Don't be adjusting the radio. Don't go too fast. Don't get too close to the car in front of you. In the rain, slow down. All those things, what's the point? Protect her because I love her. I love you. You're my child. And that's exactly why God lays all these things out, because they're in our best interest. So, let's look at a couple of things here just to make sure that we understand what went on. Okay, so let me ask you this. God allowed the Israelites to be taken from, remember, what ends up happening is, initially Abraham and his wife Sarah, they're in Ur, right? I always love that because somebody named it and they go, what do you want to name it? And they go, Ur, let's see. And they go, yeah, Ur's a good word, right? They named this town Ur, and God says, I'm giving you the promised land. I want you to go and just start walking, right? He and his wife leave and they go there. And because there was a famine in the land, they go to Egypt for a while. And then there's stuff going on, and the people who live there, because of their sins, you have, and I want you to hear this, they have droughts, which cause famines, because they're not serving the Lord. And you would say, well, they didn't know any better. They weren't God's people. Well, actually, if you take Noah's Ark to be a real story, and the three brothers that walked off that ship, right, and their wives, then we all are God's people, right? At one point, we had, you know, the thing that always amazed me is that there were people who walked off the ark that were still alive when Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed by fire from heaven. That means, don't you think if you walked off the ark, after you saw all the devastation, all the people killed, you heard the, help me, open the door, please help me, I'm drowning, all that stuff, if you had suffered through that and the ship doing everything during the storms and all that, that when you got off that boat, you'd warn anybody, right? Your kids, grandkids, anybody else, you'd warn them all about God takes this sin stuff seriously, right? And yet, in their generation, you had Sodom and Gomorrah. So, keep that in mind that God loves us so much, and we're sitting here and we're looking at this story and we're saying, okay, 229 years, God made this promise, right? While they were in Egypt, I'm going to give you the promised land. And when they got out of Egypt, when Moses leads them up there, they get there relatively quickly, and they get there. Do they go in? Do they go to the promised land that they were promised? No. 40 years they wander around while all the adults die off. Then they go back, and Joshua leads them in, and they take the promised land, right? Did they take the promised land? Because this is the first sin that you got to realize right there in terms of the promised land. What did God say to do?
Kill them all.
Get them all. Get rid of them all. And he said, they will lead you astray. They'll be like briars in your, or thorns in, there's briars in your eyes and thorns on your back if you don't get rid of them. So what did part of them do? Got rid of them. What did the other part do?
Let them live. Kept some of them.
They actually said these words. They go, why would we kill them? Because they could do all our work for us. So why don't we keep them around and just make them slaves? And that's what they did. And then they intermarried with them. And God said, that's what that's going to do to you is they're going to take all the stuff that they do and it's going to wash over onto you. And so they didn't drive them out, and then they intermarried with them. There was two things God told them not to do. And by doing that, then they learned those customs, right? Because did you all know that Ahab was actually a pretty good guy and he married Jezebel? What was wrong with that? Amber says, simple enough. She was Jezebel, right? That word has such negative connotations to it because her dad was king of Tyre and Sidon, and they worshiped Baal. And so she brought Baal worship to them all, and then they had all this different stuff. So that's the first sin that really kind of happens there. Now, everybody look with me. Go to 1 Kings 12. And we read it. You heard part of it in 1 Kings 17, but this is actually the reasoning behind it. And I want you to see this. It's 1 Kings, not 2 Kings. So 1 Kings 12. Right after Solomon dies, his son Rehoboam is taken over. Let's look at verse 25. So 12:25 of 1 Kings. So Solomon is ruler over the northern and the southern kingdoms, right? Everybody here should be sitting here thinking United States at this point. We rule over 50 states. Is that correct? 50 states?
Yep.
And right now, I'm sorry. Somebody else says, yeah, there's some territories and stuff like that. There's some others that want to be states. Puerto Rico wants to be a state. We're working on all those things. But right now, the United States is drawing up lines about who's going to, we're changing our state lines based upon our politics, right? Is that Marcy and I've talked about, the California, there's legislation right now to have certain parts of California be a new state and then have certain parts of California be an old state. The other parts, so like Virginia, West Virginia, or what I'm saying, North and South Dakota, North and South Carolina, that kind of thing. But political boundaries more so than the other. And so here they are, and right now it's all together under Solomon. But Rehoboam takes over, and then it starts splitting apart, and you have Jeroboam, and this is what he does in chapter 12, verse 25. Then Jeroboam fortified Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived there. From there he went out and built up Peniel. Jeroboam thought to himself, the kingdom will now likely revert to the house of David. If these people go up to offer sacrifices at the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem, which is in the southern kingdom, they will again give their allegiance to the Lord Rehoboam, king of Judah. They will kill me and return to King Rehoboam. After seeking advice, the king made 2 golden calves. He said to the people, it's too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. One he set up in Bethel and the other in Dan. Two calves. And to all of us, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I mean, really, truthfully, we have a hard time saying they bowed down to cows. And yet, in India, what do they have? What's their sacred animal? Cow? Can't kill them. Cows are the sacred animal for them. And so we're sitting here and we tend to look at that and we go, God, that's almost 3,000 years ago. Things have really changed a lot since then. We have the internet. We have all this cool stuff now. We have space travel. We have, and in reality, we haven't changed that much. I mean, there's still a lot of these things that are going on. So he set up these 2 calves, and it says that the people sinned, and that's where they would go and worship, that they would worship these 2 calves. And so it's one of the sins that was right there. Let's look at just a couple of the others just to make sure. Look at 2 Kings 17:7. 17:17, sorry. 2 Kings 17:17.
17 what? 17.
2 Kings 17:17. Now, I read it just a minute ago, but I want to point the fact out, something that was going on. I'm struggling here. I'm losing the sword grip. I'm in 1 Kings. All right.
Witchcraft. That's witchcraft.
Okay. 17:17. It says, they sacrificed their sons and daughters in the fire. Okay, that's the first half of that, and then we'll talk about the second half and just say it. Sacrifice their sons and daughters in the fire, and in all actuality, you later on, and it's always amazing to me because it is so like today, is that you have somebody who's really good and then their kid. If I said pastor's kids, what would you normally think?
They're the worst. Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm serious. Is that, my friend Jim Wood said, you're a blessed man. And I said, why? Because I serve, small church or whatever. He's like, I was being sarcastic. He goes, no, you have 4 kids and they're good kids. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, they're not in prison. They're not addicted to drugs. They're not, whatever. They're not causing trouble. They're not, right? They're not the neighborhood joke or whatever. And so he's making that point. But for these guys, you have, like in the Old Testament, you have people like Hezekiah. And for all of us, we would go, Hezekiah was such a great king. I mean, we should want to emulate who Hezekiah was. He's fantastic. His son was Manasseh. Do you know who Manasseh is? The Bible says Manasseh was the most evil man that ever walked the planet.
It's in Virginia.
Not the battlefield, right? Yeah. Manasseh, not Manasseh, right? Okay. So, but he was evil, and it said that he would worship Molech and Chemosh. Where have you ever heard those words? Have anybody here heard those words before? The only reason you've heard those words is they're foreign gods that the people that were living there before them were worshiping. It's Chemosh and Molech. And so what they would do is they would say, How many of y'all ever remember old movies where natives on an island would be struggling with some kind of problem, and what would they do to the volcano?
Feed it.
Take a virgin and we'll throw it into the volcano, right? To appease the volcano god, right? And that's to give us whatever. And we did
There's
this.
a movie over there.
Yes, exactly, I know. And so we look at that and we would go, that didn't really happen. But yeah, it did go on. And so the idea is what they're talking about there, that you would take one of your children and you would sacrifice it to make sure that your life was better, to make sure that you were somehow blessed by God who took your child as a sacrifice. And Christianity is just the opposite of that. God gave his son for us, right? You know what I'm saying? It's the reverse of that concept. And so for them, they would take their child and throw it into Gehenna. Gehenna is one of the words that's used for hell. You know, there's like 3 different words that are used in the New Testament. Gehenna being one of them, because it was the trash dump outside of Jerusalem and the fire was always burning there. There was always, because they burned all their trash. And so just a constant fire. And so you would toss your kid off that corner of the Jerusalem wall to worship Molech, worship Chemosh or whatever. And that seems so foreign to us, and we have stuff like that goes on in our culture today. And, you know, we have stuff around the world that goes on all over the place. The next one that's on there, and I'll point some of those things out culturally here in just a minute, but look at that next half. And I heard Dixie say it just a second ago. They practiced divination and sought omens and sold themselves to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger. Divination and omens. So, do we do that today?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's called Pokemon.
He says Pokemon. Magic cards, right, or whatever. But I'm thinking more of palm readers. You know, everybody here, you know, has watched a movie or a TV show that somebody was looking into a crystal ball, right, and going, I see this for your future, right? That's divination, sorcery.
Well, there's a lot of that creeping into the music industry, like, you know, Grammy performances, I would say.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Astronomy.
Astronomy.
Astrology. not
Astrology.
astronomy.
Yeah.
I was gonna say.
You just upset a whole group of major thinkers, right? You said astrology. Astronomy and astrology are not the same thing.
They're not.
Okay. Yeah. But you guys read the tea leaves, right? You hear that term. Read your palm.
Oh,
You know, all that is forms of divination and sorcery.
Manifest your truth.
Do what?
Manifest your truth.
Yeah. And tell you something that you don't know that they're getting from the other world. You know, one of my favorite episodes of I Love Lucy is the seance. What's a seance? I mean, if you watch the seance with I Love Lucy, you come out and you're just laughing, and you're like, oh my gosh. But if you really went to a seance, what are you actually doing?
Communicating with
Talk to
a
the
demon.
dead.
Communicate with the dead or demons or whatever. If you got a Ouija board, I mean, yeah, it's that kind of thing. You all remember me telling you that one of my worst counseling sessions was with a teenage girl that she came in. She was very upset. You know, a lady had brought her to church on a Sunday morning. She attended church, and then after church, she wanted to sit down and talk to me. And she sat across from me, and she was literally visibly shaken. She was crying, and she said, "How do you make the voices stop?" And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." She goes, my friends and I, we had a sleepover on Friday night, and we had a Ouija board, and we contacted somebody, and his name was such and such, and some weird name, and but that's all I hear now, and he keeps telling me, kill myself, hurt people, all that kind of stuff. What do I do? And of course, the lady that brought her in goes, she's mentally ill. She needs to go straight to the mental institution. And I said, no, she's just been dealing with a Ouija board. She's been doing divination and sorcery and those kind of things. And so, you know, does that stuff still go on today? Absolutely. That kind of stuff is going on in so many different ways. All right, so let's talk for just a second, and let's bring it up to today. And let's start kind of in the 1800s, and let's talk about Mary Slessor. Because Mary Slessor went to Africa, and what did she find in Africa? She found people that would take, when twins were born, and take them out and leave them in the jungle because twins were from the devil in their culture. That, you know, something was wrong with twins, and they would take them out with the wild animals or just let them die of thirst, hunger, all those things, that was going on. They lived in a culture of revenge where if somebody in my tribe died, then that tribe had something to do with it, with putting a hex on us, and their witch doctor or whatever was doing this or that, right? And so we would go kill somebody in their tribe to pay back, you know, even if it was just they got, you know, measles and died. They would blame the other tribe, go kill somebody from that tribe. So that's Mary Slessor. You know, they even did sati in that tribe. This is 1800 sati. Everybody remember? Your husband dies, the wife burns with him. You know, they're going to build a funeral pyre, put the live wife with the dead husband, and you know, and it was usually not one wife; it was multiple wives that they killed all at the same time. That he would take his wives with him into the afterlife. Jimmy Elliott found the same thing in the 1950s. And you guys would say, 1950s, God, that was way before I was born, right? Some of you all. But 1950s was not that long ago. And Jimmy Elliott goes to Ecuador in South America. I mean, people on Price is Right win trips to Ecuador, right? I mean, that's a place you would go. The Quito is there. It's up in the mountains. Gorgeous in Ecuador. 1950s, he went there, and there's a tribe called the Auca Indians who were living in the Stone Age. Right? They had no idea about anything technological. They lived in a pure culture of revenge and killing. That's all they did. And their tribe had gotten down to less than 1,000 people because they'd killed them all off. And anybody that they encountered, anybody that came into their territory, they killed. There was no negotiation. There was no taking prisoners. There was none, hey, she's a good-looking woman, let's keep her. None of that. They killed them all. Everybody. That's what he encountered in the 1950s. Darlene Diebler Rose and her husband went to Papua New Guinea during the same time period, during World War II. That's what they found in the Aboriginal cultures that they found in Papua, was Stone Age people that still believed, you know, all these different, you know, completely superstitious things. All right, so we know that because we've read Lottie Moon or Gladys Aylward or Hudson Taylor, that in China they were doing foot binding. Right? That they'd take little girls' feet and they'd break the toes under and make it where they had to walk like that because they thought small feet were beautiful. That's something that was, right? I mean, they did sati as well, killing the wives when the husband died. We go to India, you find Devadasis, right? Devadasis being that you would take children and you would put them at the temple so that people could have sex with those children as part of their worship experience at whatever temple. That going on, and we're talking about 1930 to 1960 in terms of the people that were reporting that kind of stuff, okay? That's just because that was the time period they were ministering there. So those things go on, and we go, yeah, Chris, but that's in a foreign country, like when you went to Haiti. And when I went to Haiti, it was 2008, 2010, 2013, and they have a term that they use, Restavek. What's a Restavek? Any of us could buy a Restavek.
It's the newest vacuum.
It's a person, it's a kid that I can buy, and that kid does anything that I want them to do, which means they are in charge of cleaning my house, buying my groceries, or having sex with me. I can do whatever I want with that child. They are a piece of property that I bought from you for a price of money. That's going on today. Haiti is the #1 kid sex trade place in the Western Hemisphere. Southeast Asia is not in our hemisphere. There's more there, but Haiti's the worst in terms of here. They have fake orphanages in Haiti where they'll have people when they come down there on vacations or mission trips, they'll say, come see my orphanage, and there's all these kids starving, and then you give money to the orphanage, and then the people that run the orphanages take the money, and they turn those kids out in the street as soon as you leave, and they take the money and they go live off of it until another group comes in, and then they go gather a bunch of kids off the street. They say that this is our orphanage that we run, and they get you to give money. That's going on. All right, so then let's talk about divination and sorcery. So I'll give you, because we're in the United States, right? Because so far I've just been in other cultures, and all of us would go, yeah, but they're not as educated as, they're not as, that culture, you could expect that from that. No. Okay, so Union Cumberland Presbyterian Church is that they're having church on a Sunday morning, and somebody looks out the side door because their church sits right next to their softball field. They have a softball field beside it, big parking lot on the other side. Their gym's down on this end, with Sunday school space in between. But this way is all softball field. And somebody looks out there during church on a Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. This is less than 15 years ago. So in the 2000s, they look out, and there's a group of people out on that softball field. They're like, doggone it, we don't let anybody play softball during church. Somebody's got to go out there and tell them, because we don't let people do that. So they go out there, and all the people are in a circle out there. They're holding hands. And they're like, they're praying before they practice at least, before they get started. And then they look around, and they're like, what are they doing? And they go out, and it's a coven of witches that were praying against the service. And they told them, that's what we're doing. That's why we're here. And he said, well, you need to leave. And they said, we will leave politely. You don't have to call the police. And then they all went and got in their cars, and they left. They used to have people that would march around at night around the church and leave dead animals by the doors. as part of their worship. In Knoxville, they had where people would go in and devastate whole cemeteries where they would have on certain times of the year where they were doing devil worship. They would just do all kinds of stuff, and then the police would have to come clean it all up. And it was just like worshiping by killing animals and all, and making these sacrifices and all that going on in the last 15 years. All right. Yes, Sam.
Real quick funny thing, when we first moved to Columbia, we were praying for Columbia, and every Wednesday night, we would go to the courthouse at midnight and pray over the city. And some of our staff went to prayer on the square, and somebody was like, there's a coven of witches that meets on Wednesday nights at midnight. And we're like, no, that's us praying for the city. Like,
The witches at Union actually told us that's what they were, that they were actual witches, that's what was going on. I know a church in Spring Hill where I've talked to the pastor, and he has a problem with the witches coming at night around and marching around his church at night. He's had the police have come out, called them on a number of occasions. They put up cameras outside and all that. And you never see any of that in the paper or any kind of on any news channel. They don't ever report that kind of stuff. But that stuff goes on around here. So just making sure that you know that stuff's going on.
I'm not a witch. I'm not a witch.
So the reason that I point these things out, and especially, here's the last one that I saved for the very end, is if you look on here, look at the last line. What's the last little paragraph there? The very last one. And I know I'm at the tail end. It says they cheated people. They used false weights and measures. So if you go, one of the grocery stores in Knoxville when I was a kid, were the first grocery stores, big chain of grocery stores, and it was the very first one where you could take a can of soup and run it across the radar, run it across the thing that read it, the barcode, and then it put it in and say 25 cents, can of soup, whatever. You can tell how long ago it was, right? You put that, you put it in your bag or whatever. And so they got to where the lady that was doing it or the man that was doing it for you, they run it across, somebody's down there bagging it, right? Here's your pasta, your whatever, and they're running it across. And so my grandmother was like, something is wrong. I did not buy paper towels. Why is there paper towels on here or whatever? And so she finally got fed up after about a year, and she started talking to her friends, and her friends started going through their receipts, and they're like, well, I see that. Last week I bought this. I didn't buy ragu pasta sauce. I don't know why that's on there, whatever. So then my grandmother got so fed up that she finally went and talked to the police, and she goes, something's going on over here at the grocery store. And of course they're looking at her like, you're an idiot, ma'am. You need to go home. I don't know what you're talking about. But then they had a news team, a group of reporters that went in, and they were actually adding things to the bill to see if you would catch it, to see if you would notice, and then they got an extra $1.35 out of you, or an extra 78 cents out of each person that went by. They would just click on and add on some, facial tissues or whatever it was, just something, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, something you might not notice or whatever, and they were doing that. In terms of cheating people, how many of y'all have received a phone call and on your phone it says scam like? Had somebody calling you and say, I'm from the tax service, or I'm from the Social Security office, right? I had to call Sam the other day. This is it. I'm calling Sam for tech support. I called Sam because I got an email that said somebody is on your church website, and they're not one of the people that they're using, it's not a normal computer that's doing it. And so it said it was a Google alert, click here, and I went, I'm not clicking anything until I talk to somebody, and Sam goes, no, that's a legitimate Google alert. Somebody's actually trying to break into the church's, email system or whatever. I go, oh boy, they're going to steal from us, it's my email address. I'm like, I've always said when people break into my house, they go, we need to write in a check. Nothing to steal here, right? It's that kind of thing. So anyway, I share that with you because that's one we can identify with, right? Is that when we walk into certain places, they're cheating us. We know they're cheating us. We know that this is, and so our culture has become more and more about that, is that they can slip in this or slip in that and try to cheat us. And so God takes all those sins and he looks at them as a whole and goes, and after 229 years, he said, I'm kind of fed up with you being here because you're not worshiping me anyway, and I've given you all these chances. And he goes, you go do what you want to do. And he throws them out of the land. And we need to understand that because when it's explaining it at the very end, it says, because so much innocent blood was shed. And we sit there and we look at that in our culture, and there's just I mean, think about how many people are murdered every day. I mean, how many times you watch the news and all that. There's just so much of that stuff that goes on, and you know, God's looking at it, and like I said, please, I hope we don't go to war anytime soon, because I'm not sure we're a Christian nation anymore. You know what I'm saying? And in terms of our army winning or not winning a battle because God's on our side or not on our side, I don't know anymore. And so for us, what you're seeing in these revivals is people returning to God. People saying, because the first thing that you hear out of anybody's mouth who was at the very beginning of any of these revivals, whether it was at Asbury or at Lee College or wherever they are, I mean, there was 400 people out in front of Cookeville, out in front of Tennessee Tech the other day. They were worshiping and having a revival. Is they all say the exact same thing. We just decided to get on our knees and pour our heart out to God and say, please forgive us for all the things we've done personally, what we're doing as a country, you know, and it all starts with that repentance, that repentant heart of saying, I'm sorry, not just saying it, but actually meaning that I'm going to turn from those ways and go the other way. That is the warning that we have from that particular passage tonight. So God bless you all. I hope you all enjoy it, and y'all have a great evening. Thank you so much.